Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sheila Casey, Chair of Blue Star Families Board of Directors and the Chief Operating Officer of The Hill. As a military spouse, I know military families are extremely proud to serve our country, and they work hard to stay strong while facing the added burdens of military life. I also know that what keeps military families strong is support from us, their community neighbors, and organizations like Blue Star Families. To bridge the gap between military families and civilian communities, our heroes and their families turn to Blue Star Families to be the liaison, advocate, and catalyst. Blue Star Families does this by partnering with civilian neighbors, both individuals and organizations, to create stronger communities of support for military families. As we enter these final days of March, it is hard to believe that our entire way of life has been upended over the past year. We are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we are only beginning to understand the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on our country and our military families. Because of Blue Star Families' annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey, we not only have great insight on the issues facing our military families, we also have a unique view on just how difficult COVID-19 has been for them. This year, we will focus on 4 important topics. 1, the impossible choice, housing, schools, and financial stability. 2, impact on women, female service members, and military spouses. 3, the lived experience of diverse families and implications for command. And 4, military children's mental health. And of course, how the pandemic exacerbated these already tenuous situations. Mindful of Zoom fatigue, we've engineered this year's release into a series of smaller virtual events focused on different topic areas. During today's event, you will hear personal stories directly from military families and engage in a dynamic discussion focused on a topic that directly impacts our military-connected families. Following the main panel, we will share additional data and insight and engage in more discussion during a data breakout session, which all are welcome to join. Again, thank you for joining us today and investing your time in the well-being of our nation's military families. Our nation is strongest when our service members and their families are thriving. Our military's readiness depends on strong military families, and they're counting on Blue Star Families and so many of the partners attending today to be the liaison that bridges the gap and keeps them mission ready.
I don't come from a military family, but I did fall in love with a member of the military and married him. Shortly after I was married, within a year, I found myself pregnant and then giving birth to a child who had a life-threatening hole in her heart. As I was looking for doctors and arranging her imminent surgery, my husband was coordinating our move to Okinawa. When she was 2 months, she had open heart surgery in Boston. By the time she was 3 months, my husband had already moved to Japan. So there I was, a new mother with a sick infant in a new country, leaving behind family and friends. I lost my job, my career. It was a lot. To civilians, this story may sound shocking, but to military folks, it's familiar. The fact is, all military families have stories to tell. Our stories make us stronger, resilient, but truthfully, many military spouses suffer in silence. 2020, in particular, was a challenging year. We pivoted our programming almost immediately to ensure military families had access to resources, virtual activities for their families, access to timely, useful information about COVID-19, and more.
The Military Family Lifestyle Survey has been tracking issues that military families experience for over a decade now. Some of those issues come up every year. They're persistent: spouse employment, children's education, time away from family. All of those things have been intensified by COVID-19 and this global pandemic that we're in. So Blue Star Families takes those impacts that military families are experiencing and shares them with decision makers so that they can continue to best support their military families.
This year's been difficult for everyone, but military families have been particularly hard hit, which is going to be demonstrated in the findings you're about to see. The pandemic has hit military families' ability to access resources, their ability to achieve financial stability, and it's caused families to make difficult choices about life-changing issues, such as whether they should live apart or how they can protect their family and educate their children in this new environment.
2020 was a very challenging year for everyone, but in particular for military families. Well, some of the things that we saw from the survey this year are service members' experiences of racial and gender discrimination during their military service. We saw spouse employment concerns intensify for families who are trying to virtual school or homeschool their children because of the shifts in children's education. And we saw tremendous shifts for military children's mental health and the impacts of COVID-19 and school closures on military children.
I like to call our survey the People Survey, and this year for the first time, the people get to be part of the release of it. Because due to COVID, we have this virtual event. And that means our members across the country are able to tune in, hear the results, and participate in the discussions afterwards. I think that's really exciting.
Military family resilience is absolutely tied to how well military families feel connected to the communities in which they live. Our hope is that, working together, we can better design and implement effective programs, solve problems, and minimize gaps when it comes to serving the unique needs of our military families.
I am grateful for each military and veteran family member who takes the survey. None of this work is possible without their voices. Their voices are what drives this change.
Our families are resilient, and they're the heroes in this story. Blue Star Families is here to help, to provide solutions, support, and to welcome them through our programming.
Hello again. Thank you for everyone who's joining us for the first time today. And to those who already participated in our first session, The Impossible Choice, welcome back. Everyone's been impacted by COVID-19, but we know that our military families have often endured even greater hardships through the pandemic. So with that understanding in mind, we conducted our survey in October and September of 2020, and that gave us a window directly into the military community at the height of the pandemic. For our women, for female service members and female spouses, we have seen that the impact on women may have generational consequences unless we act quickly. The fact is, women in our military-connected community had difficulties prior to the pandemic, and their situation is unfortunately worse than ever. To discuss this challenging but important topic, I'm very happy to be joined by my longtime friend, supporter, and partner in the Military Family Lifestyle Survey, Dr. Michael Haney. Mike is the Executive Director of Syracuse University's Institute for Veterans and Military Families, as well as the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Initiatives and Innovation. Mike, it's so great to be with you here today. Thank you for joining me virtually all the way up from upstate New York.
Kathy, sunny and warm upstate New York, I will add, which is a little early for us, but I am truly excited to join today for what is an important conversation. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take a moment to explain why I think it's an important conversation and why I'm excited. So for the better part of the last 7 years, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families has been a very proud partner to Blue Star Families, serving as the analytics engine behind the Military Family Lifestyle Survey. For me, as an academic, as a veteran, as someone who has worked on behalf of military families now for more than 15 years, I look forward to the annual release of the survey because of what it represents. For me, it represents a firsthand account of the lived experiences of those who are shouldering the burden of military service. And it also represents for the rest of us an opportunity. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity for the rest of us to leverage that firsthand lived experience in the context of our own work, in the context of our research, in the context of our advocacy, so that we can have impact where it matters most. In the case of today's topic and the panel discussion, the data continues to demonstrate opportunities for game-changing impact. In my own view, as a researcher and an advocate in the space, and I've said this before on multiple occasions inside the Pentagon or when testifying before Congress, the issues, concerns, and opportunities represented by the nation's women veterans, spouses, and service members continue to be less understood, less resourced, and less researched. And we absolutely must do better. And the findings detailed in the Military Family Lifestyle Survey really provide a framework for our collective action. For example, from the Military Family Lifestyle Survey, we know that women veterans are more likely to face financial and employment challenges at the time of transition. We know that women veterans take longer to find their first post-military job as compared to their male counterparts. We know that on average, women veterans experience comparatively higher rates of unemployment and have lower earnings. And we also know that military spouses experience many of these exact same barriers and challenges, often exacerbated by frequent relocations and limited access to the supportive services and resources that are available to veterans. We know all this and more because the Military Family Lifestyle Survey puts a voice to where and how we can do better. So I think as advocates and as a nation, we must do better, and we must act with purpose to address the most pressing challenges facing our women veterans, service members, and spouses. So that, Kathy, is why I'm excited for this conversation and why I am also committed to our continued partnership around the Military Family Lifestyle Survey. So thanks so much for having me here, and back to you.
Thank you. And thanks, for your partnership, not only hosting today, we're really delighted that we are bringing you this session jointly as Blue Star Families and IVMF. But, Mike, I think that the interesting nature of this survey being so comprehensive and also being annual lets us dive in together with each other to say, that's an interesting finding. What should we look at? What should we ask differently next year to try to understand the why? Or what's happening this year that wasn't the case in the past, such as the pandemic, that helps us understand, trends over time. Don't you think so?
I do, and that's why I framed this as an opportunity. And expressed how I look forward every year to the release and the data, because I think one of the important things for us to acknowledge as a community is that we are constantly evolving. The challenges, the opportunities that face military families broadly, the military connected community broadly, is constantly evolving. And the extent to which this data then highlights opportunities for us to innovate, for us to transform existing services, resources, or to explore the opportunity for new programs and resources to address new challenges, I think it's critically important.
And let me make this a pitch for why people should take the survey again this year when we field it. There's a lot of opportunity for open-ended responses, and that's how we find out what's coming around the corner and what's on your mind. As we know through many years of conducting this survey, women experience survey differently, and women often shoulder the majority of family and domestic tasks at home. This is true for female service members. It's also true for caregivers and for female veterans. And of course, it's true for female military spouses. Over the course of this discussion, we're going to explore the experience of women in the military, and the experience of women in the military under COVID was very different than the experience of their male peers. It's important for us to talk about that. We'll also look at the experience of the female military spouse. That's 90% of military spouses, roughly. We know all too well pain points existed before the pandemic, but they've been exacerbated. Our panel of experts will look at those effects as well. Throughout our conversations, please engage with our team in the chat at the right of your screen. ask your questions, share your insights, dig into the survey results with us. And after this hour of panel discussion, we want to invite you to join us for a deeper dive directly with members of our applied research team so that you can ask your questions directly to our researchers and join in with your peers. Now, Mike, back to you.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for the great honor of introducing this afternoon's keynote speaker, Lieutenant General Jody Daniels. Lieutenant General Daniels is the Chief of the Army Reserve and Commanding General of the U.S. Army Reserve Command. Throughout her career, Lieutenant General Daniels has been someone who has broken down barriers and been an authentic pioneer in the United States Army. Lieutenant General Daniels, thank you for being with us today and welcome.
I'm sorry, I can't hear the speaker, but I think you've turned it over to me. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invite to attend today's panel and to talk on this really important topic of the impact on women, female service members, and military spouses. I'm Lieutenant General Daniels, Chief of Army Reserve and Commanding General of the U.S. Army Reserve Command. I've got about 37 years of active and reserve service in the Army with backgrounds in military intelligence, civil affairs, and in training. I've served in numerous different positions and command and staff elements at all different echelons of the Army and in several different countries. I've worked in a diversity of positions, and that gave me a pretty good breadth of experiences that enabled me to have a very rich career. All of these then allowed me to serve in my current position. Just a real quick background on the Army Reserve and my role, which is I oversee about 200,000 soldiers and about 11,000 civilians, serving in 20 different time zones in 23 different countries around the world. The Army Reserve is a really vibrant organization with members from all demographics, including women who are 25% of the Army Reserve force. There are over 120 different specialties that everyone can serve in, and all of them are open to women, just like the rest of the positions today across all of our military services. So more and more women are rising in the ranks, leading their fields, and transforming the Army Reserve into a more diverse and inclusive workplace where just about anything is possible. This is extremely important because these women are paving the way and setting the example for everyone that is coming along behind them. I'm going to list a couple of folks and describe some great things that they have done, such as Brigadier General Patricia Wallace, who assumed command of the 91st Training Division out at California back in September. She's the first woman to command that division in its 103-year history. Brigadier General Wanda Williams assumed command of the 7th Mission Support Commando in December, and she became the first Black woman to serve in a job that also makes her deputy commander for all of Army logistics efforts that are spread all across Germany. In case you're not tracking, 64 women have graduated from Ranger School so far. One was Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Jaster. She was the third woman to graduate and the first Army Reserve soldier to do so. She happened to be in her mid-30s and had 2 children when she graduated. In her civilian career, she's also an engineer for an oil company and is now serving as a battalion commander. And that sort of shows you the quality of folks that we have that are currently serving in our Army Reserve. Another really inspirational woman that we have serving is Captain Deshaun Barber, an Army Reserve logistics officer. Through much perseverance and determination, in 2016, she was crowned Miss USA. There's a video out there showing her journey and the trials and tribulations that she went through to become Miss USA, and it's a really inspirational video that I would highly recommend folks watch. So I'm really proud to serve in a force with these women and have these examples that serve as a reminder of the strength that the Army gains through its high quality and diverse force. There are numerous other extraordinary stories across the Army Reserve, both men and women. They've contributed to the Army Reserve support to the homeland and overseas, either mobilized or in support of COVID-19 response efforts or ongoing missions in 23 different countries. On the topic of training and deployment support, as you may know, the Army made several policy revisions in recent months to improve accommodations on behalf of women. One is the recent revised policy on grooming standards, so women can perform more effectively while training and in combat. The revisions allow women to wear their hair in a ponytail while wearing a helmet, as a traditional bun might interfere with the equipment. This, along with the rest of these policy revisions, greatly improve functionality, health and wellness, and morale. Strides have been made also for new mothers. The Army released a memo last week that now allows new mothers 365 days to meet height and weight and body fat standards postpartum. The old policy was only 180 days, so this now gives women a much more reasonable time frame to meet the standards and to not have to worry about any adverse action if they're unable to do so before the end of a year. Similarly, a provision was approved by Congress recently to give our Army Reserve component women the ability to receive paid time off for 3 months of drill or unit or battle assemblies immediately following childbirth. We're waiting on implementation guidance to come down from the Secretary's office so that we can start giving those benefits. Until recent times, women in the Army wore combat uniforms that were designed with a man in mind. So women now have a choice to opt for a variation of the uniform that now provides for narrower shoulders, a tapered waist, slightly flared hip, and an elastic waistband. These improvements help ensure a proper fit and a more professional appearance. We still wear men's size boots and t-shirts, but progress is being made. These uniform updates are in addition to other efforts in recent years, such as women-specific body armor and provisions for nursing women. These changes only make us stronger and allow women to focus on the mission rather than struggling with the fit of their uniforms and gear. The Army also has a concept that we've been embracing called the Golden Triangle, which is an effort to reinforce how leaders take care of their soldiers by building a connection with the families and the battle buddies of those who they lead. The Golden Triangle has 3 elements, with the soldier in the center. So you have the family, which is the set of the most important people to the soldier. And then you've got the battle buddy, who's important to the soldier's squad for accountability, morale, and for care. And then you've got the squad leader, who is the most important leader in the soldier's life and is responsible for building that cohesive squad that supports the soldier's battle buddies, and the soldier's family. In the Army Reserve, we add a 4th dimension, which makes it the Golden Diamond. For the Reserve component, the employer is an extremely important part of the service member's life, because the civilian employer is that primary source of income for most serving in the Reserve component, and this is how they support their family. So my husband, John, and I are very concerned about the well-being of the Army Reserve families today. In fact, we're hosting a town hall tomorrow evening for Army Reserve soldiers and families to learn more about their concerns and the challenges that they may be having. We want to see how we can help them. For example, are there issues with childcare during battle assembly weekends or during annual training or other mission requirements? Are they facing food insecurity or financial difficulties? The pandemic has had a toll, and are they in need of mental health resources as well? 90% of Army Reserve soldiers have civilian jobs or they go to school in addition to their reserve service. So we want to know if there are any employment issues, such as unemployment or underemployment. We don't know what we don't know, so it's critically important that we be able to connect directly with them, which is why we're hosting this town hall tomorrow. Finally, we want to improve quality of life and to make sure that soldiers and their families have access to help and resources in times of need. So we're working with the commanders across the Army Reserve to re-energize their soldier and family readiness groups, the SFRGs. It's a way for units to stay connected with families throughout the year, not just during mobilizations and deployments. So the bottom line is that we want the families, to know that they are not alone. There are others out there to help and support all throughout the year. So this, along with other initiatives, are in line with a change in command climate and culture that the Army is currently trying to achieve. And although we're not quite where we need to be, it's important to continue to strive to be better for our soldiers, for our families, and for our nation. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of today's event and for what you do in support of service members and their families, including those in the Army Reserve. I will now turn it over to Ms. Megan Campion for the remainder of the panel. Thank you very much.
General Daniels, that was an incredibly motivating and informative presentation, and really excited about that. Thank you. And I want to also thank your husband, John, for all of his great work for Army Reserve families and for serving as a liaison to Blue Star families to help us better serve those families. It's a total force. National Guard and Reserve are right in there in the fight with the active component. So they are very, very important to all of us, as are the veterans that we all become after our time in service is over. Now, I'd like to share with you a little bit more about experience of career challenges that many of our military spouses face. it's difficult to maintain a career while moving, as we've already discussed. And being a primary caregiver in your household, the pandemic's effects have made an already difficult situation nearly impossible. I'd like to introduce you to Ashley, who knows those struggles firsthand as her family navigates the military lifestyle. Let's hear from Ashley now.
My name is Ashley Lundy. I am a military spouse, a mother of two, and an economic developer. So being a military family and having to move for his career and making that the forefront of the focus, it is a challenge because you have your own career goals, you have things that you want to accomplish. It wasn't a big adjustment until he left. That was probably 7 months into us dating, and that wasn't something that I really even thought about happening. And so at that point, I kind of realized, oh, this is different. I didn't want to just move and not have a job. And that's kind of been the way it's gone throughout our relationship and throughout the moves is as soon as we know where we're going, I start looking. So when we were about to move, it was when everything had first started shutting down. We had decided, if I were offered a position, I'd be moving ahead of time, buying the house, moving part of our stuff in. And so just the number of factors that we had to plan for was extensive. So having to navigate me potentially moving prior to my spouse, bringing the kids and doing all of that, and then also being safe about it and not knowing what my work environment was going to be was very challenging. It was just another earth-shattering thing that was brought into the picture. I do have concerns that we would be stationed somewhere that didn't have opportunities, again, positions and childcare, and then recognizing that the support may not be there from employers, from resources that are available, and many spouses experience the same challenge. Something that I would love to see come out of the survey is for employers to recognize, again, that there's a talent pool out there that they have not tapped into. And I think it's eye-opening not only for other military spouses, not only for your military families, but for employers as well, that you can identify an entire labor pool that you might not be considering otherwise.
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Campion, Lockheed Martin's Director of Social Impact. I have the honor of leading the team focused on improving the lives of those who defend freedom, cultivating the future STEM workforce, and strengthening the resiliency of communities where we live and work. Lockheed Martin is proud to support and stand alongside Blue Star families on our mutual commitment to the well-being of our military community, and believe it is important that we do our part to shine a spotlight on critical issues. Blue Star Families has their finger on the pulse of what is most pressing for military service members and families, and is incredibly agile in responding to those needs in meaningful ways. The annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey plays a critical role in the military community, and we are so pleased to offer our support, particularly during a very challenging year. Blue Star Families has been tracking women's experiences during and after military service for many years, and we know the military lifestyle can be different, a different experience for women. 35% of spouses who are not employed but need or want to be say they cannot because they're homeschooling their children or supervising virtual schooling. It is my honor to introduce a panel, Impact on Women, Female Service Members, and Military Spouses. The dynamic panel you're about to hear from will explore women's experiences during and after military service, the challenges they're facing, and how COVID-19 has adversely impacted them. I'll turn it over to you to begin what I'm sure is going to be an engaging discussion.
Hi, I'm Amy Goyer. I serve as AARP's National Family and Caregiving Expert. And AARP has more than 4 million members who are veterans and is putting a great deal of energy into supporting military and veteran families. So I'm especially pleased to moderate this panel. This is also a personal issue for me. I have been a caregiver for first my grandfather, who served in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, and retired from the Air Force in the late 1950s. And then for my dad, who served in the 10th Mountain Division of the Army during World War II and stayed in the reserves and served also during the Korean War. Today, we have an especially important topic to discuss. As has been mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted women. It has had a huge impact on the 5.5 million military and veteran family caregivers who I work with. And we know that compared to male peers, a greater proportion of female service members and veterans identify as caregivers. AARP's caregiving data indicates that about 64% of caregivers of veterans are women. The Blue Star Family Survey found that overall 45% of survey respondents say their caregiving situation is worse or much worse due to the pandemic. And compared to their non-caregiver peers, a greater proportion of female service member or veteran caregivers reported COVID-19 had made their mental health worse or much worse. The pandemic has also impacted military spouses in terms of employment. Nationwide, according to the National Women's Law Center's reporting of data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, nearly 2.2 million women left the workforce in the US between February and October of 2020. And certainly that includes some military spouses and caregivers who have stepped away from their employment in order to balance their caregiving roles. While leaving the workforce may be a very difficult solution for many of these women, active duty service members may simply not be able to do that. That may not be part of their choice. And they still must balance everything, their work, their home, their children, their other family members, and caregiving roles as well. So they have a lot on their plate. So it has impacted women across the spectrum, whether they're active duty, caring for veteran, or are veterans themselves. Our esteemed panel today brings an incredible array of perspectives to this conversation about the experiences of female service members and veterans and military spouses, some of whom may also be caring for a service member or a veteran, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to start with Brigadier General Lorna Maylock, who is the Assistant Deputy Commandant for Information, Director, Command Control, Communications, and Computers, leading the Office of the Chief Information Officer for the Marine Corps. General Maylock, welcome so much. Thank you for being with us today. The survey this year showed us that a majority of women, both service members and veterans, would recommend military service to a young person. I think that's really striking. It tells us that there are some good things going on for women in the military service. However, the survey also found that excluding those who left due to retirement, 1 in 10 female veteran respondents reported leaving military service due to a gender-based discrimination. So there's clearly still some work to be done. In your view, what is working and should continue? And also, where does more work need to be done to address these issues?
So really, thank you very much, Amy, for, enabling me to be a part of the team. And Kathy, I'm a really big fan of Blue Star Families for the work that you all do on behalf of all our service members. And I would say it's really great to be a part of this, DOD team. And as I tell folks, there's a lot going on that we can celebrate, and there's work to be done. And so in order to be able to do that work, you have to be inside the organization to be able to get that work done. And so, yes, we are acutely aware from a leadership perspective. We've got some really bright young women that, have voices and are not afraid to communicate to leadership about the things that we need to do to fix in our organization. I will highlight that, given that 69% of veterans and 51% of vets say that they would recommend the service, I want to know specifically why. And so if the survey reveals that result, I would like to take that on inside our institution and make it better, in order to make it better. So we'll certainly feed that in our manpower system. So one of the fundamental things that we're working through inside the military is, in this era of great power competition, fundamentally everybody knows that have served, and our families who serve with our service members, is that we're a warfighting organization, and our raison d'etre is to, fight and win our nation's battle and to be ready when the nation's least ready. And so one of the things that we're given, the new, the character of war has changed, right? And we have space, cyber, in addition to the traditional modalities of warfighting, defining lethality and the role that, that women play in this new global warfighting, where we maneuver from competition to conflict seamlessly. What does the workforce need to look like, and how do we accommodate this diverse workforce that we need? And so from the Marine Corps' perspective, and frankly, there's a lot going on in DoD to address that question. The Commandant has said, look, we can't wait any longer. We've got to change time now. And so some of the things that we're looking at changing and that we must change, while we celebrate the good, I have a philosophy that I talk to my team about. It's, let's not look backwards. We're not going that way. Take credit for that work and look forward to the things that we need to do. So the artifacts of our environment, we're really working to change that. And so we're talking about culture, about how we think about people fundamentally, and you'll hear from Brigadier General Marcella, who's Marcella was in the Marine Corps with us for a time, and she's leading across in government right now, in business actually. But Marcella will tell you fundamentally our manpower processes is industrial age, and that is where we are starting. We're starting with how do we think about reforming the manpower process that the archetype of our environment is the archetype of what a soldier or sailor is. We have to think differently about that. We have to think differently about what it means to be lethal, and that in the global competition space, this diverse force, which includes women, have a lethality in and of itself that we are now beginning to value. And so some of the things that we're doing is the Commandant has said there should be no choice between a Marine should not be expected to choose between being the best parent possible and their career. And so that's some of the work that we're doing inside the service to look at, how do we make it the climate, the culture more appealing to folks who want to have a family. And so, we, just like you heard earlier, the keynote speaker said, hey, we're looking at things like, how do we look at childcare? How do we extend maternity leave? How do we look at, creating, especially during COVID, it's created an environment for us which has made us think a little bit differently about, how can women serve, how do they support their families, and where does it make sense to accommodate a flexible kind of work schedule inside the service. So those are things that we're looking at. Some of the things also, as it's really fundamentally interesting that the Marine Corps has written a Marine Corps warfighting publication on learning. And that is a part of the larger pivot that we're making inside the institution that says, hey, we need to begin to build a diverse bench of people that creates this learning organism that we're continuing to reinvent ourselves, to think differently about the problem set so we can be most lethal to come up with the best solutions to deter our enemies. And right now in great competition, we're to outthink the Chinese. And so this idea of the intellectual edge, how do we build an intellectual edge? And that's it's not going to be with a bunch of people that think the same. And so there's a lot of momentum inside at the senior leader level, and so it's bubbling up from the bottom, where we've empowered a lot of these young men and women with bright ideas, to kind of speak to the organization. I'll just share with you something going out at Camp Pendleton right now. It's called Project Artemis, right? It is about how do we, let all these young men and these women, right, that are talented, that at a certain point in their career, they decide that having family and serving are two mutually exclusive things. And they will now choose to get out of the Marine Corps. And so we've got really, really engaged leaders, men and women, who've said, hey, look, this started with General Shea, and it's a a multifaceted program that looks at prenatal, during pregnancy and postnatal care to figure out how do we get these warfighting men and these warfighting women, with the help of their spouse and the organization to get them back on duty, because it's an operational imperative. It's not just about, the analogy that was used was, hey, look, when a football player breaks his leg, we don't go, hey, you go figure it out, and when you're ready, you come back to play. We've invested a lot in the talent we have in this organization. And so we're doing a lot of work in that space. And we recognize that this is going to be, there's a ton of battles to be won in this space. We are dissatisfied at the leadership level, and our Marines too. They're not going to let us off the hook. And across the department, you're hearing this hue and cry to go, we need to get better. Let's think about how do we creatively give programs, whether it's time out for education, whether it's time out to have a family, all the tools from the commandant's perspective and from at least the senior leaders inside my own service. It's, all bets are on the table. We need to explore all options to ensure that at the end of the day, we can be a lethal force. So, we're, again, there is no rest for this in this space. And so I think we should, there's a little bit of feedback here. We should be dissatisfied with the status quo. And that's, it's going to take the help of the team to kind of show us where some of our blind spots are, to go, here are opportunities outside the service that, and the department that can help make us better. And so this survey is really powerful in, as we get these external looks, we can take them on and we can go, okay, here's what others are seeing. And this may be an area that we're not looking at, but the powerful opportunities from the Blue Star family, the inputs from the Blue Star family surveys will help make the organization better. And so I'm absolutely convinced, just like the Commandant said, that, if we're too similar, we won't be able to be, that lethal force that we need in the fight against, a very persistent threat. The technologies enable us to do a lot more than we could envision when the definition of combat was closing with and destroying the enemy by, fire and close combat. Now we have a force that can think, has to maneuver and be lethal in the cognitive and logical space. And where do we get talent to help us in those domains? I think, it's going to take the help of the team to get us there from here. But I appreciate the question. I appreciate being a part of the team. And it is up to leaders like us, to give voice to these issues. I think together we're a powerful cabal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, General. It is really wonderful to hear you say the things about, the silver lining of the pandemic, of helping people realize, there are different ways to do things, of looking forward, not back, of finding ways to make it possible for women to not feel that raising a family or having other family responsibilities for caregiving or anything else is mutually exclusive with serving our country. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing to further this area. Next, I'd like to welcome Brigadier General Marcella Monahan. She's principal at Booz Allen Hamilton. Marcella, welcome. So glad you could bring your perspective and experience to the panel today. Female service members are experiencing challenges finding childcare and accommodating virtual schooling. It's one of the biggest challenges of this pandemic. The most preferred solution is that service members identified to alleviate this burden was permission to work remotely. And female service members work significantly more hours during doing household and childcare duties than their male peers. So given your experience as a service member, military spouse, and a mother of 8, what advice do you have for women managing work or military service obligations and family needs, especially in this context of the COVID-19 pandemic and all the additional challenges? Were there things that the Marine Corps offered that helped you when you were in that situation?
Well, thanks so much. I'm excited to be part of this panel. As you mentioned, I am a Marine veteran, I'm a Marine spouse. I'm a Marine mother. I've been on active duty. I've been on reserve. I've been called up several times. I've been a geo bachelor and I've been a stay-at-home mom. So throughout all those experiences, I think I'd like to talk about some very basic things and a couple of stories, but that if you take that context, you can expound to many other larger challenges. So we talk about work-life balance, and it's not usually balanced at all. It's dictated by events or by urgency of events or importance or criticality. There are great challenges across the board, especially now during COVID. So what I think I would start with saying is start by empowering yourself and your family to do as much as possible to minimize the external support required while we look at things and while we look to resolve things. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like Lorna was saying, build yourself an internal edge. The character of war has changed, like Lorna said. We do need to think differently, but the character of leadership does not. So what do I mean by that? Use the same skills for success at work that you do at home. You empower at work, you need to empower at home. You lead at work, you need to lead at home. What do I mean by that? You likely don't take all the work upon yourself at work, so don't do it at home either. Your junior teammates at work likely have brilliant ideas on how to resolve issues at work. Your kids likely have innovative ideas also, and you need to empower them too. We're always prepared to serve, but remember that you are also a great leader. So you don't have to be the one serving all the time at home either. Be the leader at home also. And so allow others to shoulder the burden, include them and involve them in whatever the challenges are, no matter how young your kids are. Or even if they're the ones, for example, when my daughter had conversion disorder in Okinawa and she was completely paralyzed for a while, we involved her in the PCS move that we had to do. Which car do you want to pick? Which house do you want to pick? And that is, it empowers them with self-sufficiency. It's healthy for all. So I wanted to tell you a quick story that kind of embodies that. As you mentioned, we have 8 children and they're all very close in age. And so we used to do laundry. All the laundry was done together on a Saturday, and then we'd have this big pile of clean laundry in the family room, and we'd all sit there and try and sort the laundry, which usually ended up in laundry fights and everybody disgruntled, until one day my oldest daughter, Bridget, and she wasn't that old at the time, she was maybe 12 or 13, she said, "Mommy, can I just do my own laundry?" And I thought, wow, that's brilliant. Absolutely. So in that case, so at work, to make a successful team, you have to provide the team with the right training, the right tools and equipment, and the right leadership. We'll do the same at home. So as soon as she said that, I thought, wow, brilliant idea. So I showed them all how to do all laundry, cold water. We didn't have to sort at that point. I taught them how to do laundry using cold water. So that was their training. I provided them the equipment by giving them each a laundry basket with their name on it. And I gave them their leadership was like, for example, I don't really care. The ideal would be that your clothes is folded and put away. But the goal is to wear clean clothes every day, right? So you can wear your favorite outfit every day. I don't care. I don't care what other people think, as long as we all know it's clean clothes. So they then determined amongst themselves, and they were all in soccer and sports, so there was a lot of laundry. They determined their schedule, who used the laundry, the machines when. And I'll never forget, my husband and I are relaxing, watching a movie one day in the family room, and this laundry basket comes flying down the stairs by itself. That's because 3 or 4-year-old Margaret, the youngest, couldn't lift the basket by herself. But she found a way. She launched that basket from the upstairs downstairs, and she would push it into the laundry room. And she herself also did her own laundry starting from then. So it's part of taking care of yourself too. You don't have to be perfect. Like I said, they ideally, and if you're a perfectionist, it's hard. But you got to be you got to be good to yourself first also, because then you'll be stronger for the team and for the family. So don't try to be perfect. I wanted to tell you another story real quick. So of course I was pregnant a lot when I was younger, and one of these times Kathleen was 4 and Shannon was 3, and the rest of the kids were at school, and we were at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And Kathleen came to me as I was trying to take a nap on the couch while the other kids were at school. And she said, "Mommy, I want to go to the park. Can I go to the Parker's house?" Which was several houses down on base, but several houses down. I said, somebody older has to go. So wait till the other kids get home and ask them. So the other kids got home, and I heard her, they were all trying to get snacks and stuff. And she was asking all the kids, would they take her to the Parker's house or not? And nobody wanted to take her. And so finally I opened an eye, because I could feel her watching me. And I opened an eye, and there's Kathleen with her helmet on, and 3-year-old Shannon. So Kathleen was 4 and Shannon was 3. And they both had their helmets and their bicycles ready. And she says, "Mommy, I'm older. We're ready to go." Because all I had said is somebody older has to go. So commander's intent, words matter. But what did that teach me? It taught me that words matter, but empower them to take care of situations. And Kathleen was innovative. I learned to be clearer. And most important, I supported her actions because I called all my neighbors down the road and said, "Kathleen and Shannon are coming. Please watch out for them." And what did it get me? In turn, it got me a really well-deserved nap. So I say all this because be innovative, just like you're at work. Empower your children, empower yourself. There's a lot of things we have to figure out, but start with the basics like we always do internally. And the last thing I would say is, don't feel guilty about decisions that are very personal, that are special to you. And what do I mean by that? For example, in 2009, I deployed to Iraq, and all our kids were little. They were all in grade school, except one was a freshman in college. So I respect those that would have never done that, even if they have just 1 or 2 kids or something. But my message is, don't feel guilty if it's right for you, and your family, and your situation, and your husband, and the dynamics of your family, and they will understand if you explain the right way. Because they said to me, why do you have to go to Iraq? I said, because we're trying to get out of Iraq. And so, yes, other people could go, but the intent is to bring other mommies and daddies home as soon as possible. And nobody's going to do that better or faster than I will. And they said, okay, then go. And so, you just like at work, you involve them, you empower them, but use the same skills that you do at work. And don't be hard on yourself. Decide on something, it's beneficial to you, you deserve it, and don't feel guilty about it. So anyway, thanks so much for allowing me to share.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcella. It's incredible advice. And, as you say, every family is unique. But when you look at it this way and you break it down, and I love what you said about building a team. I tell this to family caregivers all of the time. No one's meant to do it all by themselves. And I think that's true in this situation. And I love the analogies you make with work and running your household at the same time too. So thank you so much for sharing that. Especially, your personal experience really resonates, and that's what helps others so much. So thank you. Kayla. Okay, great. And next I want to have Kayla Williams join us. She's the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Hi, Kayla. It's really good to see you again today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We know that female veterans are connected to the military in multiple ways. In fact, 4% of female veteran respondents to the 2020 Military and Family Life Survey were also current active duty spouses. Indeed, and I might add that some of them were probably caring for their aging parents who are veterans as well. Indeed, female veterans are mothers, their spouses, and children of service members, but in general, society still does not think of women as service members or veterans. These other roles women have often kind of overshadow their own military experience. What do you think people need to know about these multiple roles and military connections that female veterans have?
I think one of the most important things that I want to reinforce is that for women who, like me, were in dual military marriages, when we transition out, it can be so easy, especially if your spouse has stayed on active duty, to become subsumed in that role of being a military spouse. But don't forget, especially in these incredibly challenging economic times brought on by COVID, that you may have your own earned benefits as a veteran. You may be able to access your GI Bill. There may be employment resources available to you through VA that are different from those available to you as a military spouse. And so don't hesitate to reach out, make sure you understand what those benefits are, and take advantage of them if it's a way that you can help improve your long-term financial viability or your family's ultimate success. And I definitely fall into the category that you talked about. I'm a veteran myself. I'm also the spouse of a combat wounded veteran, so I'm a caregiver. I'm trying to be a caregiver to small kids at the same time during this pandemic and juggle all of these different roles. And for me personally, that sense of invisibility, of not being recognized fully as a veteran because I don't look like a veteran, I don't have the haircut, trying to keep the posture a little bit, but I'm not as easily mistaken for a service member as veterans are because I'm a woman. I think it complicated my transition, my own homecoming, because I didn't feel recognized and visible. And so I really want to encourage other women veterans who are also military spouses who are maybe watching this to go ahead and own that part of your identity and claim it and find a community of your peers and take advantage of those benefits, because it can really mean so much to your ultimate ability to thrive in the long term.
Such a good point. And I think, you embody this multiple role person juggling everything at once. And you're right, just recognizing ourselves. I'm not a veteran or service member, but if you are, acknowledging that for yourself and giving yourself that empowerment to come across that way. And as you say, it will help others start to recognize the resources and the supports that you need and deserve. I want to close with a quick question for all of you. In practical ways, how can we help these families, especially in terms of how the pandemic has affected them? For example, as I shared earlier, a greater proportion of female service members and veterans identify as caregivers compared to their male peers. The survey also found that a third of survey respondents report their financial situation is worse or much worse, and 6 in 10 have experienced stress due to their financial situation. So we know that veteran and military family caregivers also have been particularly hard hit financially. It's one of the biggest stresses for caregivers who I work with, especially women. But nobody ever talks about that. So AARP has developed a number of free resources for veteran and military families, like this fantastic new financial workbook for veteran and military caregivers, which, by the way, the content for it was written by a military spouse caring for her husband who was injured in Afghanistan. So she's also a financial professional, but she brings both perspectives to it. So it's a really practical guide to help people get organized, budget, plan, find resources, plan for the future as well. We also have a veteran and military caregiving guide. These things can be found at aarp.org/veterans. Another thing we're doing is working with Elizabeth Dole Foundation to help spread the word about a nationwide respite relief program to give people a break that they need when they are caregiving. The VA offers the wonderful toll-free caregiver support line, which I said to Kayla earlier is such an important resource. I know that Blue Star Families is offering a discount, or I think it might be free Headspace subscriptions to help members with sleep and mindfulness and meditation. We have a Facebook family caregivers discussion group that I moderate. There are lots of resources out here, but I worry that most of the time, so many people don't know about them. So what are the things that you want these women to know is available to them? Let's start with Kayla. What do you think is important for people to know about?
I think the availability of telehealth is incredibly important and destigmatizing reaching out to seek for help. I'm going to be candid that last summer, when the pandemic was really hitting home, I had a hard time. I had a hard time adjusting to working from home constantly and to losing my norms. And I took advantage of telehealth support and re-engaged in mental health therapy. And it was incredibly important to give me the tools I needed to take care of myself and take care of my family. So look for them if you need them. Could be available through Military One Source, could be available through TRICARE if you're a veteran, could be available through VA, could be available through partner organizations like CO and Veterans Clinic, or as you mentioned, there may be some tools online on apps that you can take advantage of in your free time to just give yourself some meditation and self-care to keep yourself on track so that you have the inner resilience to make it through stressful times. And for all of us to just be candid and transparent and admit when we've used those resources, I think is also incredibly important. We've got to normalize reaching out for help when things are hard.
So well said. Thank you so much, Kayla, for being transparent yourself. As I said to Marcella, sharing our personal experiences is more valuable than any amount of talking we can do. I think that's the telehealth and the availability, and that's one, again, silver lining of the pandemic, that these things have become so much more common. General Maylock, what would you like to share? What kind of practical resources?
So at the end of the day, I mean, what we have found with our workforce now being dispersed, if you will, probably something that we all need more than anything is that connectedness. And so I find myself, making sure that on my calendar, I'm making time for engaging with people. A lot of these women, I'm amazed that, my team will ask me, ma'am, you've got somebody else coming to see you. And those things, those daily, you take time out of the battle rhythm to engage with people, to meet them where they are. I think there is no, there is no better elixir for just sitting down with somebody and talking to them face to face, what we call, kneecap to kneecap. And so the virtual piece is really, really important. There's a lot of resources out there, but sometimes, you got to put that mask on and listen to somebody and give them a hug, right? And so, it doesn't matter where you are in any organization, whether you're at the top or the bottom, you've got to make those personal people connection. And so I personally think, I thank you, AARP, Blue Star families. I mean, we can't thank you enough for doing your day job and then thinking about how do we help others that are less privileged than we are. And so, again, for me, it's the personal touch, right? Which is there are a lot of folks out there that just need somebody to just, give them a touch on the knee or a hand on the shoulder to go, look, I know you've got a lot going on inside the household there, but, let's talk through it. And that warmth of a hand on the shoulder, it just makes a lot of difference, especially since much of these situations are very, that young, not young people, but mothers find themselves in are really isolated. I mean, isolating, we've got like several high-performing, high-level folks, women that are single parent, that are working at the highest level of the department. And sometimes it's just like, hey, I know you've got really, really young children and you're at the OSD level. Tell me how you're doing. Do we need to just take a break and go to lunch? I think that, in addition to all the things that you all have said and what you're doing is going to be, the thing that kind of gets us over the hump. But again, I appreciate you all.
Thank you so much. Yes, my dad used to say there's no substitute for human connection, empathy, and understanding. And you've said that so well, that sometimes that personal human connection, somebody who gets it, is really what makes the big difference in a person's life. And I can tell you're the kind of leader who doesn't hesitate to provide that. So thank you so much for that. Marcella, what practical resources would you like to share?
I'd like to share that I'd like to alert everybody that burnout is actually a medically recognized billable physical condition with physical, behavioral, emotional symptoms that are very individual to every individual and are very varied in their physical and emotional symptoms. So if you recognize this, if I ask you, do you feel burnt out? And you're thinking, well, I do a little bit. The answer is yes, you're burnt out. And then I go back to the fact that it's a medically recognized physical condition. So it's actually a badge of honor. Don't look at it as a badge of honor, not a stigma of weakness, because the reason that you're burnt out, if you are, is because you just don't quit no matter how tough things get. You drive through the challenges, you have grit and determination. So remember that it's not a weakness, it's because of your strength that you are burnt out. And so recognize that and seek the resources that we've all mentioned here. So do if you don't like to think of it as and because the first thing we usually talk about is we go to the mental condition. Well, it's not necessarily that. That's a symptom of a physical condition, which is burnout. So recognize that and seek those resources that are out there.
It's so well said. You've made a difference for me today, because I've never looked at it quite that way. I've been in burnout myself with caregiving duties. My dad had Alzheimer's and lived with me for 6 years. It was intense. But as you say, you reach that point because you are doing everything for everyone, and you are giving and giving and giving. And as women, that's what we do. We give our all to our work. We give our all to our families. We give our all in every way to our country. And we need to remember, as you say, it's a sign of it's a badge of courage, a badge of honor in some ways. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you all for your insights and sharing your personal experiences as well. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end, so I'm going to go ahead and hand things back over to Kathy and Mike.
Thank you so much, Amy, Lorna, Marcella, and Kayla. What an incredible panel, and what amazing leaders and what moving insights. I really wish I was physically with you, and I look forward to a time when we can do that again. I got so much out of that. Mike, I'd like to invite you back with me to just share a couple thoughts. The one thing I'd like to call out before I pass it over to you, Mike, is one of the things that sticks with me, and I had an opportunity to talk to General Milley about this, is that relative to men in uniform, women in uniform are more likely to have had remote work, more likely to have had the burden of homeschooling. I'm concerned that they may be less likely to get promoted compared to their male counterparts, and that could have a generational effect on bringing up the level of leaders that we just saw in that last platform. So that's one thing I want to make sure that we highlight with the look at gender that we had in this survey. And I just wanted to mention that and hear whatever other takeaways you might have.
Well, I think that is a great point, and to then bring that back and fold it into the conversation we just had, that for me was really just listening to those perspectives was very energizing. And General Maylock, she speaks my language, talking about change and the importance of thinking differently as an impetus for innovation. I think that idea is very much aligned with the challenge that you just mentioned, Kathy, in that how is it that we change culture in the context of the military organization such that we think differently about those issues that in the past may have been barriers to promotion. How do we I think a term that General Maylock used, artifacts of our environment. I love that, because there is no institution on the planet, I think, that is more steeped in symbols and artifacts than the United States military. And one of the things that I think we must from the outside and from the inside challenge is this idea of the status quo, and how do we push back against it. So, I think the issue that you brought up is a perfect example of an opportunity to push back. I have a question for you, Kathy, if you don't mind. One of the things you and I, before this event, we talked about all that's been different as a function of the pandemic. And, we often talk about those things and we've seen impacts in the data of those pandemic driven challenges. But Kayla brought something up about telehealth, which resonated with me because I think there are also less discussed. There are things that we've learned in the context of the pandemic that by all accounts should stay. They're not things that we should abandon. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, in the context of your experience, as an advocate doing this work and working to build community and do advocacy during the pandemic, are there things that you were, or activities you were pushed to because of the pandemic that you think now need to remain, part of the arsenal, if you will, in terms of how we do this work?
I completely agree. I agree with you with telehealth. I think that there's an awful lot of dignity in telehealth, right? It lets people take the care, whether it's mental health care or even physical health care, at a time that works better for their lives. So I think that's amazing. And in our own family, telehealth for both mental health care and for physical health care has made it more possible to be a good professional and a good family member. I also think this thing that we're doing right now, I think we'll come back and do the survey in person and events in person, but maybe hybrid, so that our families and our partners across the country can take part in it. That's an amazing thing too. I could keep talking with you and with our guest for another hour. I would like to actually, but unfortunately we have to move on. So thank you so much, Mike, for helping me host today and for helping us at Blue Star Families bring the survey out every year the way you do. Before we close out this topic, I'd like to welcome Senator Tim Kaine to say a few words. As co-chair of the Senate Military Family Caucus, Senator Kaine has been a champion, especially for military spouse employment. He's utilized data like our survey and others to help enact meaningful legislation. He is a true friend and is always there when we need him. Welcome, Senator, and thank you for closing us out.
Hey everybody, Senator Tim Kaine here. Thanks for inviting me to speak with you all, and I wish we were doing this together in person. This past year has been an exceptionally tough one for American families, and especially for our military families. On top of the normal burdens your military families are used to facing, the COVID-19 pandemic has increased the strain on what is already a very challenging lifestyle. Among the many normal occurrences that were disrupted, military families faced long and uncertain waits for annual permanent change of status moves, faced closures of schools and daycare facilities, and places of worship, all while worrying about the health of their families and others. Military service members required to quarantine themselves before deployments had to spend an increased amount of time away from family. Even plans to spend valuable time off were met with lockdowns and disappointing but necessary restrictions of movement. As co-chair of the Senate Military Family Caucus, I've long been an advocate for legislation to better support the families of service members. This Congress, I'm working with a bipartisan group of senators to introduce a bill that will help military families now and in years to come. The Jobs and Child Care for Military Families Act of 2021 would change the American tax code to better support military families and make it easier for service members to afford child care. The specific provisions would incentivize employers to hire military spouses, a highly educated and capable group, through the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. It would also direct the service secretaries to allow for dependent care, flexible spending accounts for all service members. This change can save the average family of four over $1,000 a year, and it's something that is already an option for other federal and private sector workers. It needs to be an option for military families as well. Issues like military spouse employment and child care are an often overlooked military readiness issue. Military families frequently face financial insecurity due to spousal unemployment and child care burdens, especially during a deployment, and these can be a major barrier to securing and maintaining full-time work. Providing these families the support they need will reveal the full talent of the nearly 1 million active duty Reserve and National Guard spouses and would improve these families' financial security while boosting their local economies. We're so encouraged by the work that Blue Star Families and other organizations have done. You've been an incredible set of champions for our service members and their families. So please keep the pulse on the issues that our military families care about, and then help be that agent for change. There's no question the military family is better off today because of you and your persistence. Thanks again for letting me speak with you all, and I look forward to working more with you in the future.
Thank you so much, Senator Kaine. Before I turn things over to Brianna Keeler, CNN anchor, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our survey sponsors. Without their support, none of this would be possible. The demand for our work has never been greater, so thank you for supporting military families and the military-connected community. Finally, please fill out our post-event survey, which you'll see in a moment. And now, Brianna, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, I'm Brianna Keeler, CNN anchor and author of the column Homefront, and I'm also honored to be a Blue Star Families board member. As a military spouse myself, I know the burden that military spouses shoulder to support their active duty service members' careers while taking care of their families' needs. Blue Star Families is putting in the work to research the top concerns of military families, like the impact on women and how the military lifestyle affects both active duty female service members and military spouses through the annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey. This is important work, and it is affecting policy and influencing decisions made at the top levels of the military. After looking at this issue over the past hour, I invite you to join Rosalinda Mori, the Director of Applied Research and Analytics at IVMF, and speak with our research team directly in a data deep dive breakout session. During this next hour, the Blue Star Families Applied Research team will be at your fingertips like never before. So dig into this data with the people who know it best, where you will be able to ask your questions. To join our breakout session, just click on the link in the chat to the right or at the bottom of this page. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your participation is helping Blue Star Families move the needle and generate progress within the military community.